Check this out. This is shared by Vampire Anarchy over on the Reddit subsection. Vampire Anarchy, of course, is a form of anarchy where the only currency is blood. So it's very dark, very Halloween appropriate, and I don't know if I can get on board with it. It's kind of intimidating in my book. But anyway, here we go. Twitter announces a ban on all political ads. Interesting. Okay, so Twitter is halting all political advertisement across its social media platforms starting late next month. Gee, that's what great timing. A year before a presidential election. Okay. Founder and CEO Jack Dorsey announced Wednesday political message reach should be earned, not bought, Dorsey said in a series of tweets. A political message earns reach when people decide to follow an account or retweet. Paying for reach removes that decision, forcing highly optimized and targeted political messages on people. We believe this decision should not be compromised by money, he said. Well, internet advertising is incredibly powerful and very effective for Lucy. You're blocking the computer. Here, come here. For commercial advertisers, the power brings significant risk to politics. So when I first saw this headline, I was not really for it and expressed some concerns. But upon reading the article, keep in mind this is Get Your News On With Ron. People send me stuff and we respond to it in real time. I actually am sort of coming around to this point of view. And I don't know. I think I'm okay with this. So it's not like you can't post political messages on Twitter, although we all have our concerns there, and reasonably so. They're just saying you cannot buy advertisements. And, and we all know there's stuff going on behind the scenes with shadow banning and stuff like that. And that, of course, continues to be a huge concern. But looking at it just from this rule alone, I don't know if I'm necessarily against it, because I kind of like that idea where it's like you are forced to get followers the old-fashioned way with just your message alone. Bernie Sanders has a lot of Twitter followers because people spread that message organically. He has more Twitter followers than a lot of people who are still buying their way into this presidential race. There are people running for president who barely have more followers than I do. And again, I'm a comedian who streams a news show in his living room with a black cat as a co-host. That's what I am. And there are people running for president who barely have more Twitter followers than me. So, yeah, I don't think I'm against this. I think I'm actually, at first you're kind of like, oh, they're doing, but then you read on and you're like, well, actually, that just means the powers that be can't buy influence on Twitter. Now, of course, there's a lot of issues with shadow banning. There's a lot of issues with who has the ear of the people who really call the shots on Twitter. There's a lot of issues with the fact that Silicon Valley shouldn't determine which speech gets suppressed and which speech doesn't. Those are still separate issues that need to be addressed, and that's, a related but not quite the same topic. This is strictly speaking about buying political advertisements. And I'm not against the idea that they're saying, hey, guess what? You cannot buy a political advertisement. You need to earn it through your own tweets. And if you do that, that's great, but you need to earn it through your own tweets. I'm not opposed to that. Now, the article points out this is in sharp contrast with Facebook, who recently said you can buy political ads even if you're lying in them, which, and again, there's a lot of factors going on here. Who determines what is and isn't a lie? Who determines what is and isn't a political advertisement? What is Facebook going to pump over others? I know there's a lot of factors at play here, and it's not as easy as going, this is good, this isn't good. But the one thing that I think we can sum up as not being good is that Facebook and Twitter and Google, they're all in positions that they have no business being in. They have no business in making free speech decisions. They have no business in making decisions as to what gets amplified over what doesn't. There needs to be there needs to be more transparency and accountability here, because they have become so huge that they are the modern day town squares, and the law has not caught up with technology. Technology's here, the law's still here. We don't have the type of policy we need to have messages function as diplomatically and transparently and democratically as possible. We just don't have that right now. But I think this singular approach Twitter's taking is actually better than Facebook. What do you guys think? Leave your thoughts in the chat. I'll be getting to it. I think it's better to just be like, okay, you just get your messages out there the old-fashioned way. You don't get to buy advertisements. I'm kind of okay with that. I'm okay with the idea that you can't buy your way to getting more attention, because you should have to, your ideas should be able to stand on their own. And someone like a Bernie Sanders has a lot of Twitter followers. Someone like, and so does Kamala Harris, so does Joe Biden, but the idea that only your ideas are going to get you further, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think in this, for instance, I'm not total here. Let's see if there's anything I'm missing here. All right. So Twitter announces, made the decision, all political advertising, a political message reach should be earned, not bought. And this takes effect on November 22nd. The company defines a political ad as one that refers to an election or candidate, or that advocates for or against legislative issues of national importance, like climate change, healthcare. Okay, so now the water gets a little muddy. Okay, so yeah, and that's why I'm saying it's hard to just be for or against one thing. All right, I'm not for the fact that they include this second part here. All right, so if it was just candidates, I'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with the idea that candidates, and I would say limit it to presidential. The presidential candidates cannot buy influence on Twitter. I'd be okay with that. Now, if it's a grassroots candidate that is running for Congress or running for something local, and they've raised a lot of support in their community, and they want to promote some Twitter ads to reach more people in their area, I think that's a little different. I think that's kind of a different scenario. I mean, I get it. It's still electoral politics. And I do think you have to have an all or nothing approach here. So I'm for limiting it when it comes to candidates. But I think that if it's a cause, those rules shouldn't apply. And I get, well, those are still technically political ads, Ron. I get that. But I think it should just be limited to candidates. Now, I do see the difference between someone running for school board and someone running for president, but I do kind of think you have to apply it across the board. And, using the local example again, too, there could be some incumbent who has a big money machine behind them, but they're not a very good mayor, or they're not a very good city council member, and they're corrupt and they're in big pockets, and they could just buy another election with Twitter ads. Whereas maybe a grassroots candidate who's really inspired a lot of people locally doesn't have that buying power. So maybe, this ban on candidates buying ads on Twitter would give them a better shot. So, there's kind of more than one way to look at all this. But I think overall, I like the idea of this applying to candidates. I don't like the idea as much of this applying to causes. I think that causes and initiatives and stuff like that, if they want to buy advertising on social media, I feel that they should still be able to do so, because the reality is that helps get some message out. That's just the reality. But I think candidates, I like the idea of, well, if you're a candidate, you can't buy an ad. You have to rely on your own ideas. You have to rely on your own tweets and your own retweets. And again, I understand there's a slippery slope there with shadow banning and those types of issues. So it's not an easy subject. It really isn't. It's not an easy subject. And at the end of the day, what we're dealing with is these Silicon Valley companies have power that they have no business having, that they're not equipped to handle, that they don't really want to bother becoming equipped to handle. And the law needs to catch up to technology. But I think looking at this again, just on its own, I'm not necessarily against it. I am not quite for how far it goes.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your